Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Brown People Problems. Today, I'm joined by Aashima Verma. She is Indo-Canadian and immigrant and the owner of a very successful marketing company where she helps businesses scale their business through ads. Welcome, Aashima. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. How are you feeling getting on here and chatting today?
Honestly, I've been awake since 5 o'clock. I'm feeling great though. I'm feeling great. I feel like this is like the last work day for so many of us. So I'm just super excited. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm very excited to have you on here and chat. I know we've kind of known each other for a number of years now, but we've never kind of done something like this together. And like I said last time, you were the first person that came to my mind when I wanted to talk about immigration. And so I'm hoping we can get into that a little bit today.
Of course. I honestly think there's so many, there's such few places where I get to talk about that. So I'm excited to share my feelings, especially I was traveling for a month in London, UK, and it's been, I just thought it would be a normal solo trip, but it just opened up so many interesting things for me as an immigrant. So, and I was traveling with people who are born and brought up in Canada. So their experience versus my experience in London, UK, is extremely different. So yeah, it's very top of mind for me. So it's great timing.
I think there's even a difference in your sort of experience of immigration and mine, right? So for our listeners, I was born in India, but my parents decided to move here when I was very young, so around 12, which is, you're still conscious, what's going on. And that was a really interesting time because I think I was young enough to still be exposed in meaningful or larger ways to the Canadian culture or the society. But I also had a very good understanding of the belief system that I was bringing with me, right, from my country of origin. And I think that's similar to most stories, right, of immigration. Kids come here with their parents, some sooner, some a little bit later. But your process is very interesting because, you didn't come here with your family. It's sort of you made the decision as an adult to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to try something different, peace out, India, I'm going to try something different. And that just sounds like such an interesting process. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Of course, yeah. In all honesty, so I am Punjabi. I was born and brought up in Punjab. I moved out of my house for my bachelor's in Chandigarh, which is the capital of Punjab. So I was already away from home, but it's 2 hours, 3 hours from home versus a 16-hour flight now. And grew up people knew, oh, she's a smart kid, she's gonna do something well with her life. And then I did my bachelor's in commerce, and then in India the whole culture or the education system is very competitive. And since grade 6 I've known that, hey, I want to do something in commerce or business. And then when I finally sat for those all India level entrance exams, which is it's a whole different level of pressure, and I inherently knew that I was smart and I was good at this and I had business acumen, but during that test I got an 89% or percentile, and it was considered bad. It was considered tier 2, and I think from 90 above, you were considered good or tier 1, and you'll get all of the IIMs, which is the best school for management studies in India, masters. And I was I did not want to compromise, and I was what else can I do? And it all stemmed from this belief in myself. I'm no, I am good. One test cannot dictate my future. And even though I grew up with all of that conditioning, you have to be the best and all of those things, I was no, I'm going to do something else. I actually applied for Germany. Yeah, my dad at the time was working for a Canadian firm. He's a graphic designer. He's been in the field for like decades, and he told his friends that his daughter, his Canadian friend, that his daughter wants to go to Germany, and they're like, "Why not Canada?" And my dad was like, "Okay, so as a Punjabi growing up, like the narrative around this is like, if you don't have anything else to do, you're just gonna go to Canada." And I was like, "No, I don't want to go to Canada." So that's what I grew up with, and like our Punjabi movie industry, it's just like
Right.
it's a very different influence, and I just thought of like it wasn't cool or the dream for me.
Right.
It's for a lot of people, but I was like, no, I just can't. So I actually, contrary to everyone else, I was like, no, I don't want to. And I didn't even see Canada for Canada. It was just like that perception. And then I cleared all my exams, got into master's. It was like a program in collaboration with like Boston University, amazing. It was just like a stroke of luck. My dates and emails, like something happened with my travel agency and they mixed up the dates.
Oh.
And it just didn't happen the way I had envisioned. And at the time, I was like, I just need to get out of this space. Or also around that time, I lost someone very close to me. And so for me, I just like couldn't be in the country in the same state almost. And my dad was like he was in Canada at the time, just like fulfilling his contract. And he's like, why don't you just try it? There was no pressure of like getting the residence. It was just like a trial period. And I was like, and I was trying a lot of things, including marketing and digital. So I was like, okay, maybe I can just try this. And I think 3-4 months into the program, I fell in love with the subject even more. And then everyone around me was an immigrant too. When I came to Canada, it's like all the students, and we all are going through the same thing. And like a part of me just like realized, what is this Canadian dream? And I understood why people wanted to do this. Strangely enough, not enough Punjabis around. So these were people from like Mumbai after their MBAs. And I'm like, okay. So it just like opened my eyes, and I saw, and I was in London, Ontario for context.
Okay.
So a completely different experience, and I decided to stay.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a story, like something totally unexpected, like that you hadn't planned for. It wasn't kind of what you wanted. It just happened.
It happened, and then once it happened, I made that choice every year almost. Like literally, did the first program, did the second, found the jobs, all of the things. Then it was a choice. It's hard. Like my dad says it all the time. He's like, the first 5 years is always hard. Like it's always hard as an immigrant. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say was sort of like one of the hardest things for you to navigate then as an immigrant in those first few years?
I think we don't realize what being away from home means. Like when just like that 16-hour long flight, especially when you're in school, it's just that you don't have the time, even if you have the resources, and it's just so stressful. I think one of the earliest things I remember is like I came in end of November, so around the same time, and it was so cold. It's the little things, and I'm like, why do people choose this? And I remember doing people took like my friends at the time, family friends, that took me to Niagara, and I was like not impressed. I was like, I'm like, it's too cold. I don't know why, but I think it starts with language. And it's just like people not being able to understand what you're saying. And it's like I have grown up as someone who speaks English as well. So I speak English, Hindi, and Punjabi, so all three languages. But it's different. And going back to the part about like London, UK, so I just like, again, this is the first time I'm realizing, like every time I used to say something and it wasn't like understood or interpreted properly, I actually just internalized that, I'm speaking the wrong way. I didn't even realize. So when we went to the UK, people are like, so all my Canadian friends are like, oh, who's like, so you guys call apartment flats? I grew up with the term flats.
Right.
I use the word fit. Like, there's so many little things that so literally when I was in London, I'm like, I should have gone to London instead, because that language switch and like the British versus American. And my friend asked me, she's like, what do you mean you had British English growing up? Well, the colonial rule is still there because all my education system is so heavily influenced by the British. So my education is all in British education system. So we spell like British, we speak like British. So it's just very interesting to like, I just had to like kind of change my vocabulary. I still remember one of my English professors. So I was like, out of the whole immigrant lot, I was one of the people who kind of spoke better English. And he just like asked me to, and he's older white man. He asked me, and he's like, I need to speak to you. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then he goes, pointed to like our whole group, and he goes, can you just tell them this is not Canadian English? I didn't even realize. I was like, what the hell is happening? It's an English class. But the reality is the capitalization, there's like little things, our sentence formation. Like, I think for the first 6 to 8 months, it's all language.
Yeah.
It's so important. You needed to order a coffee. You needed to do everything around. So that's what I remember. And now things are different for me. But like the first 6 months, I think it was very hard to look beyond or think beyond just like the language, the communication.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking, it made me think of, my experience, and it's obviously similar in some ways, but different in others. And the whole problem with language, I remember having that too, because I think I started grade 8 when I moved here. And I remember I looked over, I was in grade 8, sitting, I don't remember what class it was, but I was sitting in class, and I turned to this guy next to me, and I said to him, do you have a scale?
Yeah.
And and that's that's what we call a ruler. In India. In India, ruler scale. And I was like, I have a scale. He was like, what? And I was like, a scale. Like, I need to draw like a line. You have a scale. And he was just bewildered. He was like, what the hell is a scale? And then I pointed it to it like on his desk, and he was like, oh, you mean a ruler? And I think that was such a vivid memory even now, but that was a really big learning experience. So I was like, wait a minute, even though I'm fluent in English, even though I've grown up with English as a really prominent language, the vocabulary, the lingo, the slang is so different. And people sort of looked at me at that time with just this fogginess in their eyes, like, what? Like, we kind of get what you were saying, but we don't actually get what you were saying. And that was such an interesting time, because I also, like you, internalize that as I am doing something wrong. Or I don't have sufficient knowledge or information. But it really quickly gets translated as a sense of deficiency or inadequacy.
Yeah, it's like, oh, not good enough or less than. I just fully internalized it for years. I wouldn't even understand, oh, that was racist, not this example, but in general, when some of our professors would treat people differently based on how they spoke. They would never say the names because they don't know how to pronounce it, or would say it wrong, or would just shorten it without even asking. People started calling me Ash, and I'm like, at the time, I'm like, I don't want to be an inconvenience. And now I think it's such a part of my life and everything. I correct every time. I'm like, no, my name is Aashima, and I don't have that sort of resentment anymore either, because I feel okay, I understand, but I have the confidence of correcting people now. So, which was not the case. I remember I scored this best internship in London, Ontario. The only person did it 4 interviews, got it, and then the whole 3 or 4 months, the team kept on calling me Aashima. I never corrected them once.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that is such a common experience for so many immigrants, right? Exactly like how you said, we don't want to be an inconvenience, right? So it just feels more convenient to anglicize your name for the benefit of the other person. And I think in many ways that's so much like at the root of a lot of like internalized racism. I think that our community here carries, you know, you're either like, I hate these terms, but you're either whitewashed or you're fobby. I really grew up with that because when I moved here, that was early 2000s. So that was like 2004, so sort of right at the cusp of like a massive immigration movement that was happening in the GTA. And I just remember there was just these two labels that existed in the schoolyard, like you're either whitewashed or you're a fob. And it was really hard because you don't know where to fit into that.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in the entrepreneurial space who are also South Asian or women of color, and they're first gen. So my experience is so different sometimes. Like, it's not about, I don't feel confident almost when, and again, you almost put on this mask of confidence because I'm confident in the work I do, but when it comes to like almost, oh, how am I looking? I remember some of my first gen friends, and even though they were joking like with each other, it wasn't about me. I think the girl was just like, I don't know what she was wearing, but their partner just like went, hey, you're giving off immigrant right now.
Oh God.
And these are like, again, these are first gen folks, South Asian, and they just made that comment without even thinking. And it was such a little thing, but it's in my head. I'm like, oh, the way you dress can be perceived as immigrant, or the way you do things can be perceived as immigrant. And there's this unspoken understanding that that's not good. It's less than the other experience or the other people. It's so wild to me, and now that I'm aware of it, I do experience it. It has happened to me. I'll go to the restaurant, and it happened very recently. It's never happened to me before, but the guy goes Uber Eats, and I'm like, no, a table for two. Yeah, and you know what, everyone, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we see Black women in this space and they're always dressed to the T, and they look so gorgeous and like always just like 10 on 10. And I've realized that it's because we as women of color don't have the option to not be, you know, all done up or all dressed, because if we're not, we're just perceived in a different way. There's some like prejudice, there's some preconceptions or some judgments, assumptions when you're not looking the part. I have a friend, again, she's South Asian, married to a Vietnamese person, and their kids look more Vietnamese. And during COVID in Vaughan, their racism was brutal, and she'd go to drop off her kids in the morning, and the other moms would say, oh, she's the nanny.
Oh, wow.
So the other day I met her in the morning and she looked so beautiful. I'm like, wow, like you're all dressed up for 8 a.m. Like, this is amazing. And she's like, I have to. It's just those little things, and it's just been weighing on me almost. And like, why do we have to, like, why can't I just like show up somewhere without looking the part? Why do I also have to spend so much energy in just like looking the part?
And to really protect ourselves from some of these judgments, right? Like these microaggressions, like these really pinch. And you kind of have to be on guard because you don't know where it could kind of come out from.
Yeah, it does happen. I know.
absolutely, we feel like we have to hide parts of our, like Indian identity, or we have to kind of change something about how we're acting, or our likes, our interests, our hobbies. I remember I wanted to go a few years ago. I think it was the first time Rupi Kaur did a show in the GTA. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I wanted to go to it, and I did end up going to it, but I remember not telling anybody in my life, because a part of me, especially the people, who kind of mock you for being too brown, I didn't share any of this with them for the fear of being mocked, right? And I think it just kind of just goes to show how much fear of like prejudice and discrimination we live in from other communities, but also from our own community.
Our own. I feel that so much. Like, I feel like, especially now, since May of 2020, people are trying to understand, especially white people in my community. And I do know that, at least in my circle, people are making the effort to understand. However, it's the other South Asian folks, whether it's first gen, second gen, who just they're just almost blinded to this, because they're like, well, I am South Asian, so I don't need to. And again, your experiences are valid, but you don't even know how you make the other person feel without being intentional about it. You're sometimes making others feel even more othered. And I think that almost pinches or hurts more.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you kind of, you're hoping that you would be kind of embraced and accepted, like within your community. But I think you're right that even in our communities, we need to do the work of examining and accepting and tweaking.
Yeah, and like in our communities especially, there is racism 100%, and we don't even talk about it like that. It's just like it's a joke, or there's insider jokes and all of those things, and it's so hard to almost address these things in a family setting. And I've tried, and it just nobody's almost open to it. The work is so gradual. At least with my grandparents, my parents are still open to the conversation.
Yeah. And I think this is that part of immigration stress or acculturation stress that we don't talk about enough. There's a lot of conversation around, like typical like immigrant parents, or just someone who's an immigrant, like working on jobs or worrying about putting food on the table and trying to navigate a new culture. But this whole idea of having to police ourselves, behaviorally, verbally, to fit in, creates huge amounts of acculturation stress.
It's exhausting. It's an exhausting way to live. And a lot of my business success, it has to be, I think, it can be attributed to staying authentic. And I know I have to lean into this part of myself as well if I want to show up fully as myself. However, the first few years of my career, I 100% was fitting in, because most of the times I was the only person of color on the team. Mostly the only person of color in the board meeting. Mostly the only young person. So I was already, I remember when I quit my job, just like feeling that the other person they just made me feel this way, like, hey, you're too young, saying these to me, like. And I feel like, I wonder sometimes, if I was white, would they have the courage to, or not courage, but like, would they feel comfortable enough to like say these things? Like, I think they just think that, just because this person is an immigrant, I can exploit them in some way. And it's so funny, because I actually just realized that 3 of my most influential employers in Canada, all of them were immigrants. Not South Asian specifically, one of them was, but everyone knew, I guess, the immigrant work ethic and they were open to it. But I wonder, like, I just realized this. I was like, wow. So because I have been the hiring manager too. So I understand there are times when people on our hiring committee, they would not be able to say the name, then they would reject the resume.
Oh, what?
It happens. I had to actively keep the resumes and say, well, even though the experience is not in Canada, it's still valid. It means something. But it happens all the time that you don't even get the opportunity no matter what. And I think that's the key difference of like the person who immigrates after their bachelor's or after work experience. You start from scratch. That's real.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I have a vivid memory of my mom. So my mom holds a PhD in microbiology as a scientist. And when we moved here, I remember her going to do an interview at McDonald's. And even the 12-year-old me knew that there was something seriously wrong with this. Like, thankfully, like, she never had to work odd jobs. She kind of got lucky. I mean, relatively lucky, where she still had to start at the bottom of the totem pole in her industry and work her way up. But I think this is such a sad reality for so many immigrants. And I think that's something that really resonated with me too. When we first met, you had said that you kind of refused to accept that like reality, that I'm not going to do these odd jobs. And you really challenged that instead of just blindly accepting it and resigning to it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, almost, as I said, I was hanging out with a lot of immigrants, so there's peer pressure. I am very lucky with my parents. They were very supportive and they never put this pressure on me. However, I think there was like a silent expectation that obviously she's going to do the jobs, or like everyone does it. They never asked me to, but they just assume because everyone does it. Everyone around me did it. I was the only one. And I think I experienced it like for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I was like, no, this is just like not okay. I can do so. And I also had, just how you phrased it, I also got lucky, even though that's not, we just think we got lucky compared to everyone else who didn't get a job that they rightfully deserved, right? It's just, we had the experience. I had my results to show for all the campaigns that I had run before. I also think because of my education in Canada, it was better for me. If I think if I just like tried to get a job, it would not be as easy.
Yeah, sure. That makes me really curious about, and if you feel comfortable sharing, what sort of your pressures were like, because I came when I was a kid. Like, I had like nothing to like worry about. My parents obviously handled everything. But, my pressures were very different as an immigrant at the age of 12. Like, I just wanted to like fit into school and do my homework. And I was figuring out this whole culture of, what do you mean I don't have to wear a uniform to school? Like, I had to pick what I want to wear every single day and learning how to work my locker. But I obviously imagine your experiences were very different and much more complex. And I wonder if there was a lot of pressure of any kind with immigrating at this age.
I immigrated 6 years ago. I am 27, so around 21, 22. That was the age. And for the first 2 years, I didn't go home because there's also like a very weird trend. Like people don't visit home until they have their permanent residence. It was very interesting. And after the second year, I was like, no, this is not. There was a lot of just like rejecting the unsaid rules when I came here. I think one of my biggest pressures, I think as a South Asian person and as a South Asian daughter, I think one of my biggest, when you say pressure, the number one thing that comes to my mind is like just the pressure of finding a partner. It's so interesting, but because my parents now are in India, both of them, my whole family is in India. My mom keeps on saying this, even though very educated, very supportive, she just keeps on saying, I just want you to have your family there. I just want you to have a partner who will take care of you there. And I know she means it in the best way, but I didn't even question or think about these things. Like, I was closer to turning 25, and that was the age that my mom like had fixed in her mind, like that the timeline that she has for me. It's like, oh, she has the job, she has everything. Like, I remember my mom telling me, she's like, you're well settled, what are you waiting for? And the well settled, I'm like, according to who? And then now I am 27, I'm going to be 28, and my mom, and now they understand me. We've had a lot of conversations, and even though they're not pressurizing me, every time I visit, there's a random auntie just commenting about like, why am I not married? So in this stage right now, that's my number one, I guess, pressure. But when I had moved, when I immigrated, I think for me it was personally just because I am ambitious. I really wanted to prove myself. I wanted to prove everyone that I could make the money I could. Like, I was good enough to be, I deserved this. And I think at a time, I think my last semester, I had 3 different jobs. All of them were in digital marketing, but I had 3 different jobs along with school. So, and I remember every job like almost paid minimum wage. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So every job kind of paid me minimum wage, but at least I was getting the experience. And then I didn't want to stay in London, Ontario, because it's so white, not open to our culture. Like, it's just you can't get the food, let alone other things. So for me personally, I just like really wanted to prove myself. And then moving into GTA, even though I felt so much more included, I saw more people, Brampton felt like home.
Okay, perfect. So Aashima, how do you think, and maybe you reflected on this before, but how do you think now living here in this part of the world has impacted or shifted like your identity as a brown woman in any way?
I genuinely don't believe that I would turn out this way if I was living in India or working in India. I think, so for example, my brother, he grew up in India, went to a school in the same state of Punjab, like universities in mechanical engineering, like got a great job, all of those things. However, that's his world. He like the openness to the rest of the society, it's almost missing. So I feel like the Aashima that I was 6 years before, like before moving to Canada, I genuinely did not know anyone else's almost experience of living. I just know how brown people live, and that was it. It. I did not know Black people's experiences. I did not know white people's nothing at all. And I also did not know the opportunities that were available to me. I know there are challenges of being an immigrant, and I also never take for granted the opportunities and, you know, just the beautiful things that have happened since I've come here. And I do believe that I wouldn't have gotten those chances. So my identity, which is also rooted in just the work that I do, at least in this season of my life, I think Canada has shaped me, like, just to become this. I don't think I would have ever started my own business if I was in India. Something that's, nobody, at least in my family, like, it was just not the thing. Like, my dad's in the service industry, like, this was not even an option, especially in my 20s.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely a lot of growth that happens, right? As we face a lot of challenges, and in your case, face like most of them alone. You don't have your parents and your family here to fall back on. So to face them alone, that can be a very transformative time in someone's life.
Yeah, I feel like it does feel like you're in survival mode all of the time. I think I just like had this sense of relief after I got my permanent residence. Like, okay, you know, like it's okay. Now and literally I think I got it in the month of May last year. And in the month of June, I incorporated my business because like it's just such little things that I wasn't even allowed to have a business bank account on my work permit. It's just, and you can't pay taxes. You can't have an HST number as a non-resident, or like not as easily. It was just so hard to legally live and operate a business. And that was like 100%, I feel like, just changed me. And I think being an entrepreneur in itself it's a journey, and I think I've grown so much, the highs and lows, only because of this choice that I've made. And I think, just like as you said, navigating all of these challenges alone, it's real. It's just like sometimes it's just like the little things when you get sick and all you want is to like have your mom around. It's such little things, and I do know that I'm so blessed that now I run my business, and it's one of the main reasons that because I own my own business, I can travel to India, I can work from India, and I do that 2 to 3 months in the year. Again, very lucky. And it's totally, it's hard, especially when I think you're going through personal challenges, whether it be a breakup, whether you're sick, all of those personal things, when you really crave that family to just rely on. All of my friends around here who I think we were at this one of a kind show recently, and all of my friends are born and brought up, a very diverse group, but born and brought up in Canada. And my friend asked, she's like, "Oh, do you have anyone in Ontario? Like any family in Ontario?" And I'm like, "No, I don't have family in Canada." I'm like, "Actually, I don't have family in North America." And everyone just went silent and whoa. And I'm like, yeah, and for me, I'm just living, it didn't even occur to me. It's just something that I lived with. And everyone was like, "Oh, so what are you doing for Christmas?" I'm like, "Well, I don't even celebrate Christmas." So it's just always, I am in between these two cultures, especially because I travel quite often. I feel like it is a different person that I become almost when I go home, and then I'm here. And I'm always navigating, do I belong? Where do I belong? And the answer is usually somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Gosh, I didn't even think about some of those little things, like you said, seemingly little things, experiencing, a heartbreak or cold, or you're sick and you don't have the comfort of family. That can
home cooked food.
You gotta cook all the
just little things.
I can see that. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with me here. Just being vulnerable and coming on here and sharing with everyone.
Of course. No, I thank you so much for creating this podcast. Thank you so much for asking such thoughtful questions. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting with you today. And, we could talk about this for days and days and days. But this has been really lovely, just learning more about your experience and seeing the parallels, but also the differences in our immigration journeys. And congratulations again on your business. Everything seems to be going really well.
Thank you so much. It's truly a blessing. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, if anyone would like to get in touch with Aashima, I will leave all of her contact details below. Definitely check out her work. She does some really awesome things.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
The guest and the host at Brown People Problems do not offer individualized therapeutic advice, and our conversations should not be interpreted as such. This podcast is not a replacement for therapy. This podcast exists for educational purposes only. Please consider your circumstances and engage with the content mindfully.